While everyday Americans are worried about things like soaring inflation, crime in their neighborhoods, and whether their kids are getting a decent education, the left is off chasing shadows and inventing conspiracies. Their latest fever dream, Elon Musk is secretly running the country. That's right, Democrat leaders who seem to think X is the new Oval Office are out here blaming President Musk for everything under the sun. Forget addressing the problems that actually matter to people. They'd rather spin wild tales about billionaires in hoodies pulling the strings. And when it comes to the government shutdown, let's talk about the 1,400-page behemoth they were trying to pass. Yes, 1,400 pages, because apparently it takes that much paper to cram in spending for programs most Americans never even heard of. Like clockwork, the bill was packed with niche funding and questionable projects designed to win over a few key lawmakers while ignoring the real struggles of working families. And when people started asking questions, fair questions about what was in this mountain of text, the left's response wasn't to explain or defend it. No, they pivoted to blaming Elon Musk, as if a few posts are what's really holding Washington hostage. This isn't governing, folks. It's finger pointing, pure deflection. And we're going to take a closer look at just what they were trying to sneak through while hoping you wouldn't notice, as well as some of the highlights from the debates around the bill. Starting with this classic sign of Washington dysfunction, the first bill, a 1,547-page monstrosity that Democrats and some Republicans try to sell as a bipartisan fix to keep the lights on. According to Reuters, the bill included $100 billion in disaster relief, funding for infrastructure projects, and even $25 million for Supreme Court security. Not terrible, right? Except that's just the surface. Buried in those 1,500 pages were gems like legislative pay raises, the first since 2009, and a shady land deal to transfer the RFK Stadium site so DC could build a new stadium for the Washington Commanders. Because when you're staring down inflation and skyrocketing grocery prices, clearly a football stadium is priority numero uno. And believe it or not, it gets even better. According to Reuters, the bill also tackled junk fees and hotel bookings, deepfake pornography, and authorized year-round sales of E15 fuel. Oh, and let's not forget the $95.3 billion in foreign aid sent to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, with barely a whisper about how any of it directly benefits struggling Americans at home. Now, I'm not saying some of these issues don't matter, but is this really what's urgent right now? Is this the kind of spending you cram into a bill to keep the government's lights on? Lawmakers didn't even have time to read the whole thing, let alone debate it. And yet, here we are, another bloated, pork-filled monstrosity that died because, shocker, it was exactly the kind of reckless nonsense people are sick of. Now, here's where the timeline gets interesting. Trump blasted the bill publicly, calling it a bad deal that Republicans should walk away from. According to AP News, Trump's comments pulled House Speaker Mike Johnson into line, and the GOP killed it. Democrats, meanwhile, threw a tantrum with Hakeem Jeffries claiming Republicans were at fault for abandoning their own negotiations. But here's the truth. It wasn't Trump chiming in, and it wasn't Musk's post about it at 4:30 in the morning that sank this bill. It was a fact that, once again, Congress stuffed it with pork, handouts, and wasteful spending that don't serve regular Americans. And thus enter the second bill, a slimmed-down, 116-page version that aimed to clean up the mess and present a more palatable option. In fact, in case you're wondering, these are both bills next to each other right here. You see the difference? According to Reuters, this bill kept funding for federal agencies through March 14th, maintained $100 billion in disaster relief, and even included $10 billion in agricultural support to struggling farmers. On paper, it looked cleaner. Gone were the legislative pay raises and the RFK Stadium nonsense, but the bill still had its critics. Why? Because it was seen as yet another temporary Band-Aid. Critics called it a stopgap measure, pointing out that it didn't solve the bigger problem, runaway spending and a looming debt crisis, and while it was more concise, it failed to win bipartisan support. Trump stayed firm on his position, and Hakeem Jeffries doubled down, accusing Republicans of prioritizing billionaires over working families. Meanwhile, Democrats refused to help push it through, effectively sealing its fate. So what do we have here? Two bills, one bloated, and the other a half measure, both singing under the weight of political dysfunction. The first bill died because it was crammed with pork barrel nonsense that nobody could defend. The second died because Washington still refuses to face the real issue, our government's addiction to spending. And who gets the blame? Elon Musk, apparently, because it's easier to point fingers at billionaires on X than to admit that Congress can't do its job. And you have to look no further than Representative Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut. The purple-haired Karen prototype delivered amazing theatrics in Congress while discussing the bill. So if you're wondering what's wrong with Congress, this clip is a pretty good place to start. Take a listen.
We worked hard over the last several weeks, back and forth and back, to say, we can accept this, we can't accept that, we will do this, we will do that. We worked hard. And to talk about what some of my colleagues have said, the Democrats are in the minority in this body. When you have the pen, which is what the Republicans have, they write the bill. They write the bill. They post the bill. They agreed on a bill.
They signed.
And you know what? They got scared because President Musk told them, President Musk said, don't do it. Don't do it. Shut the government down. Imagine. What does he know about what people go through is when the government shuts down.
Wow, quite the performance from Rosa DeLauro. And if we didn't know any better, we think that she's auditioning for Real Housewives of Capitol Hill rather than addressing the American people. The purple hair flying, voice quivering with righteous indignation, and hand-waving theatrics worthy of a Broadway debut. DeLauro wants you to believe that Republicans under the puppet master influence of President Musk are single-handedly responsible for derailing the latest spending bill. And if you were to take her at face value, you'd think she's cracked the Da Vinci Code of government conspiracies. But as usual, the reality is far less dramatic, and DeLauro's rhetoric unravels faster than her talking points. First off, let's address the President Musk conspiracy theory. According to DeLauro, Elon Musk fired off a post on X at 4 a.m., and suddenly Republican lawmakers dropped everything and fell into line like hypnotized minions. Does this sound like serious political analysis or something you'd hear in line from your cashier at Whole Foods? The truth is, Musk, love him or hate him, has about the same authority over Congress as DeLauro has over her hairstylist color wheel. But let's get to some of the substance of the criticism of this bill so far. At over 1,400 pages, this bloated monstrosity was crammed with pet projects, pork barrel spending, and political handouts that have nothing to do with improving the lives of hardworking Americans. And here's the kicker. This isn't new. For years, Congress has been pulling the same stunt, rushing through massive last-minute spending bills with little to no oversight. Take 2022's Omnibus bill, which clocked in at over 4,000 pages and included millions of enhanced tourism in Tunisia and gender equity in Pakistan, according to the Congressional Budget Office's appropriations breakdown. This is how Washington works, folks. Ram it through, avoid debate, and dare anyone to question it. And why does this matter? Well, because of the little fact that the United States doesn't have money. The national debt now sits at over $34 trillion, according to the U.S. Treasury, and the interest payments alone are set to outpace defense spending in just a few years. Congress keeps piling on debt, borrowing from the future to paper over problems today, while ignoring the fact that inflation is squeezing American families. Wages are stagnant and people can't afford their groceries or gas. That's not governance, that's irresponsibility. Now here's what DeLauro doesn't want you to hear. The shutdown didn't need to happen. Congress could have passed a short-term, clean funding bill to keep the government running while actually debating the waste packed into those 1,400 pages. But they wanted the pressure of a shutdown to force it through. And when someone had the audacity to hit pause and ask, what is in this thing? DeLauro deflected with her Musk conspiracy theory, because it's easier to scream about a billionaire than it is to defend the bill's flaws. At the end of the day, Americans don't care about purple-haired theatrics, social media posts, or petty finger-pointing. They care about whether their government is spending their hard-earned money wisely and working to solve real problems. DeLauro's tantrum is a distraction from the truth. This bill was excessive, irresponsible, and emblematic of a Washington culture addicted to spending money it doesn't have. If you want to know why people are pushing back, it's not because of Elon Musk. It's because the math doesn't add up, and no amount of shouting is going to change that.
His employees furloughed? Hell no. Is he furloughed? No. And when you shut the government down, people don't get paid. And maybe if none of us got paid if the government shut down, some people on the other side of the aisle would feel differently about where we're going in this effort. We had an agreement. But you know, this is not different from what we've experienced over the last year and a half or so. Think about it. Biden, McCarthy, deal, come together. Next day, walk away. Johnson, Schumer, deal. Next day, walk away. And now this deal, walk away from it. Who do we trust in this body? And above all, can the American people trust us? Trust us with their lives. When we had a moment, when we came to agreement as Democrats and Republicans, and then we were able to say, let's move forward.
DeLauro has officially turned the volume up to screeching. I mean, at this point, she's practically one octave away from summoning a car alarm. Between her breathless pacing, borderline yelling, and nonsensical comparisons, I'm not sure if this was supposed to be a serious critique of government shutdowns or a one-woman reenactment of The Exorcist. Either way, She's more focused on theatrics than making a coherent point. Let's start with her Musk obsession. She's trying to argue that Musk's lack of personal stake, meaning his employees don't lose their jobs or paychecks, means he doesn't understand the impact of a government shutdown on federal workers. By making this argument, she's framing Musk as an outside force, holding the government hostage because he allegedly encouraged opposition to the spending bill. What she's really doing here is an appeal to emotion, trying to paint Musk as out of touch because his companies, being private, don't grind to a halt when Congress can't get its act together. But that's not a moral failure of Musk's part. It's a failure of Congress. Her argument creates a false cause, as if Musk criticizing the bill is the reason federal workers are missing paychecks, when the real culprits are lawmakers like DeLauro herself, who tie essential government operations to these bloated 1,400-page spending monstrosities. Instead of admitting they're to blame, she's deflecting and whipping up outrage because it's easier to point fingers than to take accountability. Now, the real issue here isn't Musk's lack of compassion. It's Congress's lack of competence. DeLauro's outrage is aimed at the wrong target. If she wants someone to blame for federal workers losing paychecks, she should look no further than the mirror. It's Congress's refusal to govern responsibly, to pass targeted lean spending bills that prioritize essential services, that creates these shutdown crises in the first place. Musk didn't furlough those employees. You did, Rosa. Maybe if lawmakers like her spent more time reading what's actually in these 1,400-page monstrosities instead of yelling about billionaires on X, we wouldn't be in this mess in the first place. Now let's go deeper into what DeLauro doesn't actually want you to know, the actual content of this 1,400-page monstrosity. These bills have become infamous for their sheer size and lack of transparency, with lawmakers expected to rubber stamp them before anyone has time to figure out what's actually buried inside. And with this one, it's no exception. According to the Wall Street Journal, this bill includes $110 billion for disaster and farm aid, which on paper sounds fine, but the allocations lack specific details on where the money is going and how it will be spent. Translation: Congress is shoveling cash out the door with no clear plan for oversight or accountability, which raises serious concerns about waste and misuse. And let's not forget where large portions of this money is flowing. Foreign aid, another consistent lightning rod, is packed into this bill without prioritizing domestic issues. It's the same playbook. Billions go overseas while American families are struggling to keep up with inflation, high gas prices, and stagnant wages. But instead of explaining why Congress continues to send your tax dollars abroad without a second thought, DeLauro is busy shouting about Elon Musk's post on X, as though his opinions are somehow more dangerous than lawmakers recklessly signing off on billions in unchecked spending. The question DeLauro doesn't want you to ask is simple: what's in it for Americans? Because when you peel back the layers of this bloated 1,400-page bill, the answer isn't reassuring. According to Reuters, recent spending bills have included vague and questionable allocations, such as funding for stadium enhancements and niche provisions addressing issues like deepfake porn, while broader priorities remain underfunded. This pattern reveals Congress's tendency to funnel resources into poorly defined projects instead of solving urgent economic and social challenges here at home. And here's where it gets rich. DeLauro cries about trust in government while ignoring the reason Americans don't trust Congress. Want to know why? Because fiscal responsibility left Washington a long time ago. This year's federal budget deficit is already at $1.8 trillion, according to the Congressional Budget Office, one of the largest in history, behind only the pandemic blowouts of 2020 and 2021. And interest payments on our national debt, they've just hit $1 trillion annually for the first time ever, surpassing both Medicare and national defense spending, as reported by the Treasury Department. Yet here they are, demanding we move forward with a 1,400-page bill no one's read, and screaming at anyone who dares to pump the brakes. And then there's the rhetorical flourish. Who do we trust in this body? That's the cherry on top. Who indeed do we trust, Rosa? Because Americans sure as hell don't trust politicians who keep ramming through bloated spending packages to saddle future generations with mountains of debt. DeLauro acts like the shutdown is some tragic Republican conspiracy, but let's be honest, Congress itself created this mess by turning last-minute spending bills into annual hostage negotiations. And now, when someone dares to ask what's in the bill, her answer isn't to defend it, it's to scream at Elon Musk.
You also plan to make important investments to address the roadway safety crisis, including the critical funding that would accelerate the development, and this is an area I've written to you about, of the use of female dummies in crash testing. This will start to fight the gender inequity among vehicle safety and crash.
Yes, you heard that right. While families are scraping together pennies to pay for groceries, DeLauro proudly touts a budget investment that will, brace yourselves, fight gender inequity among crash victims. That's right, folks. Washington has finally solved inflation, crime, and crumbling infrastructure, so now they're spending your tax dollars to make sure crash test dummies are properly gender diverse. If this sounds like satire, I promise you it's not. This is your government at work. Now let's break this down. DeLauro frames this as a critical investment in road safety, claiming female crash test dummies will somehow fix a crisis on America's highways. But here's the kicker. This isn't about safety. It's about virtue signaling. Real solutions to roadway safety involve infrastructure improvements, better traffic enforcement, and safer vehicle design, not a gender quota for plastic mannequins. Needless to say, there is no evidence that funding female dummies will significantly reduce crash fatalities. But hey, when you're looking to score points with the woke crowd, facts don't matter. What does matter, apparently, is slapping a feel-good headline onto an otherwise bloated spending bill. And let's not forget the context here. This is the same Rosa DeLauro who just finished screeching about government shutdowns, blaming Republicans and Elon Musk for standing in the way of a responsible budget. But now we see what those priorities really look like. Taxpayer-funded plastic dolls designed to appease social media activists, while the rest of the bill throws billions at wasteful pet projects. According to Reuters, these bills routinely include niche spending that has little to no impact on regular Americans' lives. While inflation continues to squeeze wallets, with the consumer price index rising to 2.7% in November, the real priorities like fixing rising energy costs or rebuilding supply chains, nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, let's look at the state of the economy DeLauro conveniently ignores. Wages are flat while the cost of living continues to climb, forcing families to stretch their budgets to a breaking point. Unemployment is sitting at 4.2%, meaning millions of Americans are still out of work or underemployed, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Worse yet, consumer sentiment remains in the tank, with 70% of Americans reporting that the economy is poor, according to a recent AP Norc poll. But don't worry, folks, I'm sure equitable crash test dummies will solve all these problems. I'm sure they'll help out the single mom working 2 jobs to keep food on the table. I'm sure they'll comfort the family choosing between paying the electric bill or their rent, because nothing screams progress like taxpayer dollars funding plastic mannequins while America's economy crumbles around them. Here's what's actually happening. This is Washington's favorite trick, taking real issues like road safety and burying them under layers of woke nonsense and wasteful spending. They slap equity and inclusivity on something, throw it into a 1,400-page bill, and then dare you to vote against it. If you do, suddenly you're the problem. But let's be real, this isn't about improving anyone's life. It's about looking good on paper and pandering to a political base that values slogans over solutions. At the end of the day, Americans want Congress to fix problems they actually face, not virtue signaling stunts about gendered crash test dummies. Inflation is climbing, unemployment remains high, and American families are losing faith in the economy. But Rosa DeLauro wants you to believe this nonsense is a win. Maybe next time, Rosa, instead of fighting inequity for crash test dummies, try fighting for the regular American who pays for this garbage in the first place.
Let's get rid of the debt limit. Let's be done with it. You know, we don't have to go through this. And the reason why they want to lift the debt limit is because they can't get their folks to do it. You know, so they look at this as an opportunity, you know, to do it, and then they can do whatever they want in terms of taxes for the rich and the billionaires, like President Musk. So
Democrats wouldn't support that as part of any spending deal.
Representative DeLauro really dropped the mother of all financial wisdom. She says, let's get rid of the debt limit. That's right. According to Rosa, the problem with Washington's addiction to spending isn't the debt itself. It's the pesky little cap stopping Congress from maxing out the country's credit card without a second thought. And she's delivering this gem with all the conviction of someone who thinks the laws of math are just mean-spirited suggestions. Now let's start with the absurdity of this proposal. The debt limit isn't some arbitrary obstacle to progress. It's a safeguard against complete fiscal anarchy. It's a mechanism that forces Congress to confront its own spending addiction, however briefly, and at least pretend they care about the national debt. For Rosa to say we should just get rid of it is like a shopaholic saying, you know what would solve my credit card bills? Getting rid of my credit card limits. Brilliant, Rosa. That'll fix everything. But then she takes it a step further, blaming Republicans for wanting to lift the debt limit because, brace yourselves, they can't get their folks to go along with it. This is where Rosa plays a classical rhetorical trick of deflection. Instead of acknowledging the real issue, Congress's runaway spending, she pivots to blaming Republicans for having the audacity to ask for fiscal restraint. And of course, it wouldn't be a DeLauro speech without dragging Elon Musk into the mix. Apparently, Musk is now the shadow president of America, pulling strings to ensure tax cuts for billionaires. Forget Congress's failures. Forget the bloated $1.8 trillion deficit this year alone. Nope. According to Rosa, it's all all Musk's fault. Now let's unpack this tax cuts for the rich talking point because it's as lazy as it is dishonest. Here's what Rosa conveniently ignores. The top 1% of earners already pay over 42% of all federal income taxes, according to the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation. In fact, the bottom half of taxpayers contribute less than 3%. So when Rosa talks about the rich not paying their fair share, she's either willfully ignoring the facts or hoping you don't look them up. And here's another fun one. While DeLauro rails against billionaire tax cuts, she says nothing about wasteful spending programs that Congress keeps tacking onto these trillion-dollar bills. Programs that don't help working families and often benefit the politically connected. So here's the truth Rosa doesn't want to say out loud. Getting rid of the debt limit isn't about fixing the economy, it's about removing accountability. It's about making it easier for Congress to spend your money recklessly while blaming billionaires, Republicans, and everyone else under the sun for the mess they created. And that's the trick, isn't it? Rosa would rather point fingers at Elon Musk or rail against tax cuts for the rich than answer a simple question: why can't Congress live within its means? Americans are drowning under rising prices, stagnant wages, and an economy that feels increasingly out of reach. Meanwhile, politicians like Rosa DeLauro think the solution is to borrow more, spend more, and strip away any mechanisms that force them to think about the consequences. And here's a hard truth: the left doesn't just want to lift the debt ceiling, they want the freedom to spend your tax dollars however they please with zero accountability, no limits, no checks, no questions asked. It's the ultimate blank check for a government that's already proven it can't be trusted to spend responsibly. And that is utterly ghoulish. These people are so addicted to power and spending that they're willing to saddle future generations with crushing debt. Also, they can keep funneling money into pet projects, wasteful programs, and politically expedient handouts. They scream about compassion and equity while mortgaging the country's future to prop up their woke agendas. It's not just reckless, it's immoral. DeLauro and her ilk don't care about solving real problems. They care about the ability to burn through your hard-earned cash without ever being held accountable for the wreckage they leave behind. And the kicker, they'll call you the problem if you dare to question any of it. But it seems as though DeLauro isn't the only one on the Democrat side who thinks this way. As always, they're in lockstep with the same talking points.
For the Republicans, for President Musk to come in at the last moment and blow up the deal is just intolerable. I mean, you have to negotiate, and you have to be able to enforce what you negotiated. And what was negotiated is a very good deal for the American people, as they will see when they see the details.
Shout out to Congressman Jerry Nadler, who managed to waddle his way onto the stage just in time to blame, you guessed it, Elon Musk for blowing up the deal at the last minute. According to Nadler, Musk's comments have somehow single-handedly derailed this very good deal for the American people. And once again, the left has turned their favorite billionaire boogeyman into the villain of the week because it's easier to blame him than to explain why their so-called deal fell apart. Let's start with Nadler's rhetoric here. What we're looking at is a classic case of false cause fallacy. Musk speaks his mind publicly, usually on X, and Nadler jumps straight to claiming Musk's opinions are responsible for Republicans walking away from this deal. But here's what Nadler conveniently leaves out. It wasn't Musk who killed this agreement. It was the contents of the bill itself. Republicans didn't blow it up because of a post on X. They walked because this deal, like every other massive spending package out of Washington, was packed with the usual pork, wasteful spending, and poorly thought out priorities. And then there's Nadler's big line. What was negotiated is a very good deal for the American people. Oh, really, Jerry? Are we supposed to just take your word for it? Because, let me guess, you'll let us see the details after the bill is passed, right? Where have we heard this before? Every time Congress rushes through one of these last-minute deals, it's like a piñata stuffed with cash for special interests. These bills are always thousands of pages long, filled with obscure provisions that no one has the time to read, much less debate. Nadler tells us it's good for the American people without mentioning what's in it, because he knows the second you start digging, you'll find the usual parade of waste, mismanagement, and virtue-signaling nonsense. And let's talk about what these good deals really mean for working Americans. Forget Nadler's rosy spin. Here's the reality. According to the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, America's trade deficit still sits at a staggering $73.8 billion. That's not just a number, it's a direct reflection of how much we're buying from foreign countries while American manufacturing struggles. This imbalance doesn't just hurt industries, it hollows out entire communities. Jobs are lost, wages stagnate, and local economies dry up because we've allowed foreign imports to dominate the marketplace. And what does Congress do? They pretend these deficits don't exist, refuse to invest in American production, and then celebrate bills that do nothing to address the problem. And here's a kicker. Nadler doesn't want you to ask why these bills always fail to deliver for working Americans. His appeal to authority, telling us to just trust the process, is laughable. Year after year, Congress passes these bloated omnibus packages behind closed doors, cramming them full of pork barrel spending that does nothing to solve real issues. They refuse to prioritize essential funding, cut waste, or take a serious look at how their decisions affect families across the country. Instead, they pat themselves on the back and blame Musk, Republicans, or anyone else who dares to hold them accountable. So what do we really have here? Nadler's tantrum is a smokescreen, pure and simple. He's blaming Musk to distract from the fact that this very good deal is just more of the same. Reckless spending, ignored trade deficits, and misguided priorities that don't help everyday Americans. This isn't progress. It's Washington doing what Washington does best. Wasting your money and telling you it's for your own good. Spare us your theatrics, Jerry. Musk didn't blow up your deal. You did, because, once again, Congress delivered nothing but bad decisions dressed up as progress.
Hakeem Jeffries is the Democratic leader in the House. He said earlier that not only was he a no on this new deal that failed tonight, he was a hell no. Yeah. Are you a hell no? What's your view of this?
Look, Leader Jeffries is exactly right on this, and I find it just laughable that the Republicans are saying, well, actually, the Republicans couldn't come together and cut a deal, but the Democrats should have gotten out there and saved their sorry butts and actually pushed through a deal. That's just nuts. The Republicans can't come together because they can't stick to the deal they originally negotiated. And this is on them. And it really is the reminder who now runs the Republican Party, and it's Musk. He's the one who started tweeting at 4:30 this morning about what a bad deal this was and how terrible it was. And Donald Trump trails along much, much later and says, yeah, terrible deal. And then Donald Trump is the one who says, maybe we should get rid of the debt ceiling altogether. But is that what the Republicans propose? No. What the Republicans say is, let's just do a little period of time of getting rid of it, long enough to be able to grease the skids, to be able to pass a big tax giveaway to billionaires.
So you don't think Democrats should step in to help Republicans here? But on the debt ceiling,
this deal?
On the debt.
Senator Warren desperately tries to blame the breakdown of spending negotiations on Elon Musk and Donald Trump. According to Warren, Musk started posting about it at 4:30 a.m. about what a bad deal it was, and Trump trailed along much later to echo the sentiment. But here's the thing. This timeline may be technically correct. Musk posted first, and Trump followed. But Warren's entire premise that these two men derailed the negotiations with these comments is a textbook post hoc fallacy. Just because Musk posted first doesn't mean he caused Republicans to walk away. Opposition to the deal wasn't driven by social media posts. It was driven by legitimate policy concerns and disputes within Congress. So Warren's attempt to frame this as Trump and Musk leading Republicans off a cliff is not just misleading, it's dishonest. Her narrative ignores the actual causes of opposition to this bill. Runaway spending, pork barrel allocations, and a bloated 1,400-page package no one had the time to read. Instead of engaging with the substance, Warren zeroes in on two easy targets, Trump and Musk, because it's politically convenient. This is a deflection tactic, classic Warren, meant to distract from the fact that Congress keeps serving up spending bills that saddle future generations with mountains of debt while failing to deliver real results for Americans. And let's be clear, blaming Musk for this is absurd. Yes, Musk criticized the bill first, but Republicans were already skeptical because the deal, like so many before it, was packed with wasteful spending and half-baked priorities. Warren can point fingers all day, but the truth is, the dysfunction in Washington isn't caused by billionaires on X. It's caused by lawmakers like Warren who refuse to address the real problem. A government that spends more than it earns and relies on debt as a crutch. Now let's move on to her point about Trump and the debt ceiling. Warren claims Trump has called to get rid of the debt ceiling altogether, and she's not entirely wrong. He has floated this idea in the past. However, here's a key context Warren conveniently skips. Trump first proposed abolishing the debt ceiling back in 2017 during a closed-door meeting with Democrat leaders Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. According to the Washington Post, Trump argued at the time that the debt ceiling created unnecessary economic crises and repeatedly threatened to derail fiscal negotiations, suggesting that eliminating it will prevent the reoccurring brinksmanship that rattles markets and confidence in the government. But here's where Warren's framing starts to fray. While Trump raised the idea back then, he has not publicly reiterated a position to abolish the debt ceiling outright since. In fact, during more recent fiscal battles, Trump has largely criticized runaway spending and and emphasized the need for stricter controls, essentially aligning himself with pro-spending limit Republicans. So Warren's attempt to portray Trump as a staunch advocate for getting rid of the debt ceiling right now is wrong, and at best it's misleading. It's a clever rhetorical trick. Warren is dredging up Trump's 6-year-old comment to create the illusion of contradiction in his stance, as if he doesn't align with the Republicans on fiscal responsibility. In reality, she's misrepresenting his position to score cheap points and make it seem like Trump is at odds with his own party. At the end of the day, Warren's rant is a little more than political theater. She's cobbling together timelines, misrepresenting Trump's long-standing position on the debt ceiling, and blaming Musk for a breakdown that was already in motion. So while she stokes outrage for the cameras, the American people are left wondering, why is Congress still delivering bad deals and pointing fingers instead of doing its job? According to Warren, apparently the answer is always someone else's fault. Anyway, as we've seen, Democrats are largely in lockstep with the narrative they're trying to push about the spending bill, and this gets reflected all the way down in their state media apparatus as well.
A bipartisan bill to keep the lights on was scrapped. And it has a lot of folks asking, who is in charge? Because I've been saying it for a while.
Yes, you have.
I've been saying that I think Elon Musk believes he's president. I do.
Well, you've been calling him vice president.
I've called him vice president. I called him president because I don't know what JD is doing. I hardly ever say. I don't remember the last time we even talked about JD.
You're right. He's planning the presidency when they get rid of Trump.
So you think it's Musk Vance?
Possible.
Hey, you know who? Stay away from the stairways. Because, people put the leg out to trip you going down the stairs. Watch out.
All right, let's unpack the latest conspiracy-laden fever dream coming out of The View, courtesy of Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar. According to these two, Elon Musk apparently thinks he's the president, or maybe the vice president, or maybe he's secretly scheming for world domination alongside J.D. Vance. Who knows? The details are murky because, well, there aren't any. What we've got here is a prime example of baseless speculation served with a side of paranoia, all because Musk criticized a spending bill. And once again, Democrats have chosen Musk as their public enemy number one. Why? Because they can't stand that he's given Trump and conservatives a platform on X that they can't control. Musk isn't a president, but he is a thorn on their side. And that's enough for Whoopi and Joy to float crackpot theories like it's an open mic night for political fiction. Now let's start with Whoopi's baffling question. Who's in charge? Whoopi, allow me to answer that for you. The elected government is in charge. The last time I checked, Elon Musk doesn't occupy the Oval Office, sit in Congress, or wield any formal power. What he does do is express opinions on X, a platform he owns, and that seems to send Democrats into a frothing rage. But here's a civics lesson for The View. Our republic includes 3 branches of power, and last I checked, the vice president's job isn't to constantly hog the spotlight. The VP's primary constitutional duties are to preside over the Senate and step in if the president can't fulfill his role. That's it. Being the vice president doesn't require a daily press tour. And let's not pretend this is some groundbreaking critique of political silence, because Whoopi and Joy's favorite woman, Kamala Harris, spent years fading into the background before being propped up for the 2024 campaign. Where was the outreach then? Kamala was practically invisible as vice president, didn't even visit the border, which she was a border czar, vanishing from the spotlight for months at a time unless her handlers needed a soundbite. Yet now, suddenly, we're supposed to clutch our pearls over J.D. Vance's public profile? Please. Being low-key as a VP or as someone being positioned for a future campaign isn't a scandal, it's a political strategy. Acting like it's anything else is pure spin, and we all know it. Now let's talk about the Musk obsession. Democrats are in a frenzy because Elon Musk disrupted their media monopoly. X, when it was Twitter, used to be their favorite echo chamber until Musk bought it and dared to allow opposing viewpoints. That's what this is all about. The left has decided to villainize Musk because he represents free speech they can't control. When they can't win on ideas, they invent boogeymen, and Musk has become their top target. But here's the reality. Criticizing Musk doesn't change the fact that the spending bill failed because it was bad policy. Congress scrapped the bill because lawmakers, including Republicans, had legitimate concerns, not because Musk made a 4:30 a.m. post on X. Acting like he orchestrated some secret takedown is laughable and frankly gives him way too much credit. Not to take anything away from the man. Finally, Joy Behar's theory about Musk planning the presidency with J.D. Vance is so detached from reality it borders on comedy. Musk isn't even eligible to run for president, but why let facts get in the way of good conspiracy theories? This kind of nonsense isn't political commentary, it's fear-mongering designed trying to distract their audience from real issues, like why the government keeps failing to pass clean, responsible spending bills. At the end of the day, what's really going on here? Whoopee? Joy? Why all the hysteria? Are you panicking because Elon Musk disrupted the cozy narrative control you once enjoyed? Is that why you're grasping at these wild conspiracy theories, trying to paint him as some shadow president pulling the strings? And while we're at it, where's all this energy when it comes to understanding how our system of government actually works? What happened to defending the constitutional roles like the vice president, whose job, by the way, isn't to be the star of the show? You seem to be fine when Kamala Harris disappeared for years, so why the sudden outrage over J.D. Vance supposedly lurking in the wings? So here's the real question. While Democrats like Warren, Nadler, and DeLauro are busy spinning conspiracy theories and blaming Musk for their failures, who's actually looking out for the American people? Who's addressing skyrocketing inflation, out of control spending, and a $34 trillion national debt? Who's fixing the trade deficit that's hollowing out American jobs? Instead of offering solutions, they're peddling bad bills filled with waste, screeching about billionaires, and staying in lockstep to distract from their own incompetence. So ask yourself, is your life better because of the politicians blaming Musk for everything? Are your bills lower, your streets safer, your opportunities greater? Or is this just more of the same excuses while families struggle and Washington pats itself on the back? Anyway, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Have a terrific day. Peace.